And we're live.
There you are, large.
Well, that didn't quite work out. Okay, we've got 10 people there with us. 11. Hello,
Hey, guys.
folks. Sorry for the delay here.
Don't you love seeing Adam close up?
Huh, something like that. Well, this interface seems to have changed since the last time we did these
Since
jams.
May?
I think it has.
Well,
I'm not seeing the option to pin
Pin.
anything.
Well, while he's fiddling with this, I hope everyone has had a good summer, and we haven't seen you since May. We've had a pretty good summer all the way around. Anybody have any clifftop stories to share? This year, the weather was great. So was Rockbridge this year. Pretty amazing weather all the way around.
Yeah, truly.
Tell us some of your favorite. What tunes did you like there?
We are still there.
We're still there.
This just isn't really working the usual way. It's not showing me my own comments.
Well, dang.
So I can't pin that thing.
Well, shoot.
Mm-hmm. Should I stop it and start it again? I don't think so. We'll just tell folks that what they need to find is up above somewhere.
There
Okay.
you go. Sorry for the wait.
Hi, folks.
Yeah.
Don't mean to keep you all waiting. Can someone please comment and verify that you're seeing us in sync with ourselves? Are we in sync with ourselves, best you can tell? Whenever I do too much messing with the phone, it sometimes wants to fall out of sync. And if we're out of sync, we can restart. Yeah, we had this problem last time too. Remember, the feed wouldn't keep going.
Any comments that say so?
Okay, Ron Kephart sends a check mark. Hopefully that means we're in sync. Hi, Sue. All right, clear and in sync. Lee verifies. Thank you so much for that. All right, I think we're ready to go. See, we've got this iPad sitting here so that I can monitor comments, and the comments are coming in, but the video feed has been frozen like that for like 2 minutes. I don't know what the matter is.
Why don't you close it on there and open it?
Close it and open it again?
Yeah,
That's
just
a good
not on the
idea.
main video.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. As you can see, we did not practice technology while we were out
Right.
on the thing.
Well, that's because we thought we knew what to expect
Yeah, we
from
did.
this platform. All right, there we are.
There we are.
And there are the comments. Brendan says more or less in sync, but it's varying. Mary Sue says all good. Thanks, y'all, for helping us out.
Thank you.
Hope you've all got your instruments with us to jam along. It's going to be much more fun that way than if you think of this as a concert, which it definitely isn't. If it gets too slick for you at any stage, just let us know.
Yeah, we did
and
not.
We'll do something.
We didn't work on slickness this summer, but we did. The last two people that you mentioned, we got to play with in real life this summer.
That's right.
Brendan and Mary Sue.
We sure did.
And hopefully there's some others that we saw in real life this summer.
That's right.
But it was a lot of fun, as it always is, to be in person.
We're going to be in the key of G for this whole jam. Banjo players, feel free to pick a G tuning of your choice. You might know which one I would choose. The fiddle's going to be in standard tuning the whole jam, GDAE. The guitar is going to be uncapoed for the whole jam, although Beth is going to make at least one chord that might be a little unexpected, and she'll talk about that
We'll
when
talk
the time
about that.
comes.
And as usual, I wanted to point out that I play A with one finger.
Although, do we have anything with an A in it?
I don't think so, but just
Yeah, I don't
to-
think we do this
just
time.
to point that out. I do, so just in case you see something weird.
We sometimes
kind
do.
of thing. And before we get started now, hopefully we're cranking here and
Yes.
everything. Before we get started, we just want to send our deepest thoughts and wishes and prayers for everyone in Western North Carolina and Southwest Virginia.
And East Tennessee.
And East Tennessee. It's just heartbreaking, and we have so many friends, and I'm sure you do too, that have been affected by this. So let's put all of our best wishes and whatever help we can manage
Yep.
together.
Positive energy, pocketbooks,
Everything.
man and woman power, whatever we've got.
Whatever we can do.
For sure.
Yeah. All right.
Time for a tune after
Yeah.
all of that. Brushy Run is our first tune. We've included Brushy Run in a program before, but in our effort to never repeat a tune except Breaking Up Christmas, which is usually in our holiday season jam list, we're doing Brushy Run in G, which is the way Ed Haley recorded it back in the 40s. The other time we did Brushy Run, it was in cross A tuning, which is the way it seems to be circulating through the festival scene. So same melody pretty much, but very different layout for the fiddle. I think this is a little trickier, but it sure has a nice mellow sound. Hopefully you'll enjoy it too. Banjo players might not have to worry about it being different at all. Brushy Run, kind of the way Ed Haley did it, at least in his key and fiddle tuning.
So it froze again.
Yeah, our video feed is all frozen up again, but comments are coming in.
So,
Go figure. Joanna Hartness is watching. Hi, Joanna.
Hey, Joanna. Hey, Marshall.
Yep, that's Beth's daughter and grandson, respectively.
Yeah.
All right. Peter Bell, hello.
Hey, Peter.
He's playing his new tubaphone.
Woohoo!
Or at least he has it there with him.
That was an adventure we had this summer, was helping Peter find a new banjo at Bernunzio's.
Yeah, super fun.
And in that process, you both got to play a banjo that was for sale.
And still is.
And yeah, I expect finding a buyer is not the easiest thing.
Right.
This banjo was only priced at $250,000.
That's right.
It
If
was
you want to look at a $250,000 banjo, go to Bernunzio.com and check the Resonator banjo
And
section.
Adam didn't buy it.
No.
You know, I think you were thinking about it, right?
If
Yeah,
only.
right. But-
It did have a beautiful sound. It was a little gaudy for me.
Yeah, but it was really something, and going with Help Peter was a lot of fun.
Yes. Hello, Hank Johnson. So glad to
It's been
hear
a
you're out there.
long time.
Paul Kirk. Hello.
Hey guys.
All right, let's play another
Congrats
tune.
on your book, Paul. I think you just that was just published.
Oh yeah,
Is
super
that right?
exciting.
Yeah.
Book about Marion Theed. I'm not sure I've got the pronunciation of her last name right. Maybe you can clue me in if I'm wrong.
Yeah. Paste something in the comments about it. I'm sure folks would be interested.
Yes, about your book and the
Yeah.
correct pronunciation
Yeah,
of
right.
her name.
It's not my best thing in life is pronunciation. That's for
That's
sure.
all right.
All right.
All right, we're going to play the version of Fly Around that came originally from Frank Blevins and his Tar Heel Rattlers. And some of you out there might have been introduced to this version through Raina Gellert's fabulous recording of it. It was her first CD that contained this tune, and I think that was a lot of our introduction to the tune. And the A part melody is kind of the usual one. The B part melody is completely different from the usual one, and of course the key has changed from the usual one. Beth and I wanted to actually go over the chord progression slowly once round
Because the
before
timing
we
is
break
odd.
right into it. Yeah, the timing of the changes in the A part is peculiar,
Yeah.
and then the B part just hangs on the 5 longer than you might think. So nice and slow, just once round. Faster and at greater length too. Such a pretty tune this is. that a fun tune?
That's a cheery tune.
Love that. I'm surprised we haven't included that in one of these jam programs before now. It's just so good. And aren't we grateful to Raina Gellert for helping to get it into circulation? Seems like everything she's ever recorded has turned into a modern old-time classic.
On that Ways of the World, every single one,
everything
I
was
think.
so good.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's see who's still out there. Oh, good. Paul posted information about his book.
Good.
CD. Thank you, Paul. I will remember it this time.
Yeah.
At least I'm saying I will. I will try. Allie Jean. Hi, Allie. So glad you're there. She likes that version of Fly Around too. Ethan Hazlitt. Hello,
Hey, Ethan. We got to
Miss
see him
you
this
too.
summer, too.
Yep, but want to get together again.
Yeah.
All right.
That's the great thing about stuff.
Jaybird died of a whooping cough is next on our list. I love the Slippery Hill website, and if you don't know about slippery-hill.com, you should check it out.
We had a very interesting experience this summer. We got invited to go to an Irish jam, which some of you may know that we're closet Celtic lovers. Maybe not so closet, we're all the time. But we don't play Celtic music very much, but we're learning to do it. So we got invited to a Celtic jam in Bridgewater, Virginia, and we walked in, and who should be there but Larry Warren,
the king of Slippery Hill.
of Slippery Hill. So it was great to get acquainted with him.
Yep.
I'd not met him before.
Right, saw him again at the Rockbridge Festival, and he has created such an amazing resource for the old time music community. So if you don't know about that website full of hundreds of old recordings, well, mostly old, some less old, you should check it out. But I guess my point is, maybe I didn't use the search engine correctly, but I couldn't find on Slippery Hill anything about Jaybird died of a whooping cough. And I searched for Jaybird, one word, and I also searched for whooping in case Jaybird might have been split up. And I couldn't find it. So if anyone out there knows where this tune came from, we'd be grateful to find out.
Maybe Paul or Brendan, maybe one of you guys know.
Yeah, Brendan, do you know where this tune came from? We learned it from Stephanie Coleman, one of our favorite fiddlers. And I think she might have gotten it from Sammy Lind of Foghorn. But don't quote me on that either. All right, Jaybird died of a whooping cough. Sort of standard progression, except for one thing. When we get to the B part, Beth is going to ride the one a lot longer than you might expect.
Beth is going to hope she remembers to ride the one, but we're going to try.
Jaybird died of a whooping cough. Let's see if anyone has told us where that comes from. John Ashby, Brendan says, thanks, Brendan. You came to the rescue just like we hoped. That's great. That's a Virginia tune.
Yeah, John Ashby. How about that?
Yeah. All right. Sandy Parks is calling in from Bridgewater. How about that? Sweet little town you have there. All right, we're going to play Jimmy in the Swamp. This is one that I think of as kind of a Missouri tune generally. If anybody knows a specific source, let us know. Bob Walters is one, but I'm not sure he's the one. So much of that Missouri repertoire was played by multiple fiddlers of that earlier generation. But it's a great tune, and we would love to play it. That's right. So this one has the one shape of the whole night that you might not recognize.
And we might have talked about this before and everything, but there is this tune has two minor chords in it, and one is the E minor here.
No, the other one is the 7 that you use.
It is?
B7, yeah. Uh-huh.
B7?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And Jimmy in the Swamp?
Uh-huh. I think so. I don't think it's that B minor.
I think it is.
Well, we'll see. Show them both.
Okay, all right.
We'll see what turns out when you play.
We did work this out before we got on. Okay, so anyway, it's got an E minor and a B minor in it. One B minor.
We think. You think.
I think.
I think it's the B7.
I've always played a B minor.
You think it's the B minor?
I think, but whatever.
Do whichever one you want, because they're both great sounds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to do the B minor?
I think so.
Okay.
He's usually always right, though, so we'll see.
We'll see.
Anyway, it's kind of a moot point, because if it's a B7, this is your standard B7 chord. 1, 2, 3, 4. Like this, you skip a string and then add the one in the middle there on the first fret.
First fret of the D string. Yep.
I don't think I play a B7, but we'll find out.
I think 15 years ago when we recorded this, neither of us had learned that Chester B minor yet.
Okay.
I listened to that track just the other day to see what was going on.
Okay, we'll find out.
We'll find out.
All right. Don't ever refer to me as an expert. That's for sure. So anyway, so if it's going to be the B7, it's going to be that, and if it's going to be the B minor, you're just going to raise that finger.
That's right, and alternate open and closed strings across the
set.
So
that's a B minor. Okay, maybe you're right. I'm sorry. But anyway, I'll only use that B, whichever it is. I only use it the second time in the B part.
Yeah, B part number 2.
And if you don't want to go for that, you can just stay on the 5.
Yeah, she's going to use the 5 at this same
time around.
spot in the first B part.
Right. Maybe I swear. Okay. See, even when you practice, you have these issues, you know.
It happens. Remember what I said about us getting too slick?
Yeah, right. It's not going to happen with us, that's for
No.
sure.
swamp and let me go down on record that Beth was right about that B minor. As soon as I heard that B7, I thought, ooh, that's kind of too jazzy a sound for this tune.
I think that maybe in some tunes that you can go to a B7 and if you like
against that E minor.
I think it can sound, you know, that nice dissonant sound.
Because I know you use that chord in
many things, but usually if you're going to substitute for a 5, it's going to be the minor. It seems like to me that's been the case. But that little back and forth negotiation between us is a pretty important thing to see, because you know in old time music, in essence, always the fiddler is going to be the one who's going to set the pace and the tone of everything, and is going to make the choices. You know, you can discuss it and say, well, I like such and such thing, but always, if you're going to have a cohesive sound, you're going to want to match what the fiddler wants to hear
on the chord instrument.
On the chording instrument. So it's an important thing. You can argue and you can get after each other and stuff like that, but in the end, it's really important that you match what each other is thinking. So,
and I aim to not be like a dictator in a dictatorship, and we do work out a lot of these chord progressions together.
Definitely.
A lot of good ideas.
Definitely, but I think it's good that that you talk about those things, because if you're not, one of the points of these jams is to give people who don't have an opportunity to get out and play with other people, they don't have people in their area or whatever, is to give you a chance to be in a jam,
feel what it's like,
and feel what it's like.
And this sort of conversation gets had a lot in live old time jams. How are we going to chord that section? How many times are we going to play that section? That sort of thing. Because none of this stuff is really that fixed, and that's a lot of what we love about it. It's a very flexible genre, and we can personalize it, but it also makes it a little tricky to convey.
It makes it tricky, but it also, you know, you should definitely have discussions. Can we go to this one next? In the view of that?
Sure.
Is that any problem?
No, that's fine. Okay. Just flip it around a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, so this tune was coming a little bit later, but I think this is a really good time to talk about this. Well, you can say who it's from and everything. And I would like to, those of you who don't know me very well but have probably already figured this out, I am not a person who's tremendously aware of source material. I've never been a person who's studied source material and so on. So, and as my usual saying is to say, if you ask me where a tune is from, I'll say Bruce Molsky. You know, so that's just me. You know, that's just who I am. Many people love and research the sources, and it means a lot to them to play it, you know, in the way that the source person played it. And that's fine. That's very valid. In the case of this tune, it was very interesting to me. I've been playing this tune.
Shall we say what it is yet?
No, not yet. But I learned this tune in the late '80s, and I have been playing this tune that long with various different fiddlers, and probably have been playing it 20 years. Until I am playing it the way that I was taught and what I heard and so on and so on, and never got any flack about it or anything from anybody. And then I played it with another friend who was not even on the fiddle. That friend was on the banjo.
Isn't that funny?
And that friend, and I played...
Who will go unnamed.
You know, unnamed friend. It's still a friend. You know, shouted at me, it is not that chord, it is this chord, you know, and I'm like, what do you mean? You know, I've been playing it like this for 20 years and nobody's ever said anything. No, the source person did this chord, you know. So Adam and I thought, this person is nuts, you know, because I never heard any such thing. So right before, when we got ready to do this jam, we went to the source.
We decided we wanted this tune on the list.
On the list, and we went to the source.
We went to Slippery Hill.
Slippery Hill. And sure enough, the source person does put in the chord that my banjo playing friend said, you know.
That was news to you.
That was news to me. For 20 years I played this thing. And then, so we tried it with the source chord, and we hated it.
So we're not going to do it
So we're not going to do it with the source chord.
We're going to do it your old way.
But that's the thing. You play what you like if it agrees with who you are playing with.
Right.
That's the thing.
Yep.
You know. So.
And we're playing this together. We're not playing this with Fiddlin' Arthur Smith,
That's
who was
right.
the source of North Carolina
Like
Breakdown.
Breakdown.
And the chord in question is the chord that anchors the B part of this tune. We both, I was this way too, even though I had never played the chord instrument, were used to a 4-chord starting the B part, the C chord. And it turns out that Fiddlin' Arthur Smith's band put an E major,
an E major,
chord
and
at the top and midpoint.
when
of
they
that
hollered
part.
that at me in the middle of that jam, I thought, what are they saying? I mean, how could it possibly be that chord, you know? And I threw it in, but I have never gotten adjusted to it at all. And you know, so I do make a point of asking, you know, if it comes up
when we play with other people,
and we're playing with other people, I make a point of asking now that I know that it could be something else, a different way.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's not horrible to play something the way that you hear it. You just want to make sure you're matching who you're playing with.
Absolutely.
You know.
And it's always interesting, I
Yeah.
think, to take cues from the old recordings, but
Yeah.
if you don't like something that's on one of the source recordings,
Yeah.
that doesn't make what you're doing with the tune wrong or bad, necessarily.
Are there any comments on this
Let's see.
topic? We probably beat it.
Oh, this is a great one. Paul Kirk, you're so wonderful tonight. Paul says the music is an expression of the times and of its players.
Thank you, Paul.
Indeed. And so it's a growing, changing thing. And the people on those old recordings that we look up to so much probably didn't sound exactly like the people they learned from.
Right.
We like them because they
Right.
sounded like themselves. You're going to love this before we play. Michelle Pellet is out there. Hi, Michelle.
Hey, Michelle. Another person we got to hang out with this year.
During the last chord conversation, the
Yeah.
B7 versus B minor, she
Yeah.
says, "Buckle up, folks, it's an Adam Beth throwdown." And then in parentheses, she says, "The sweetest, politest throwdown ever." Hilarious. I love that. You've seen it here first, folks.
Yeah, but I think we're illustrating that, you know, once again, just make sure you're in agreement with who you're playing with.
Yeah.
You know, that's the important thing. The important thing is a blend and a suiting of the personalities that are there at the moment.
That's right.
That's the way I see it. So,
That's what it's about.
yeah. All right, we'll try to quit running off the mouth so
All right.
much. Here we go.
North Carolina Breakdown with the C chord, the
With
4
a
chord,
C as
and the
opposed
B
to an E
part.
major. Any of you at home who we can't hear are welcome to throw in an E major
Yeah,
if you
play
wish.
whatever you want.
So-
We can't hear you. much fun.
That tune's always been lots of fun.
Yeah. Let us know which chord you prefer in that B part, the C or the E major, or the E minor, which I haven't really heard people do, but in some ways it'd make good musical sense.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make two statements. Number one, it wasn't Brendan that was the unnamed banjo player, and and two, that I have never been able to call this tune by its actual name ever since I heard another banjo player call it North Carolina Broke Down, which sounds so much more fun to me.
I love that title, so, North Carolina Broke Down.
Yeah. So anyway, to banjo players.
Yes. All right, if you don't mind, I'd like to backtrack to that one.
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Of course.
Maybe save that one for another time.
Whatever.
I'm feeling a little unwieldy on it
Okay,
tonight.
fine.
Although, maybe we can come back to it later on.
Okay.
We'll see. Let's do number 6 on that list.
Okay.
All right, we're going to do a real favorite of ours for a long time, Rebel Raid, the version that comes from William Hamilton's Stepp of Eastern Kentucky. And if you don't know this tune, the B part structure might catch you by surprise. I think of it as a half-length B part relative to the standard length A part, and I think of it as being played 3 times with little variations across those 3 times that don't have to matter, especially if you're playing the banjo or if you're playing chords. I'm going to treat those 3 B parts a little bit differently on the fiddle, but you can or not. And Beth is going to use that E minor again in the A part, and otherwise the chords are the usual suspects.
Pretty
right?
much. Yeah.
Such a pretty tune. title that was on William Hamilton Stepp's old recording was actually The Rebels Raid, like possessive, but everybody around us seems to call it just Rebel Raid, the title of the completely different Ed Haley tune. How's that for
It's very
confusing?
different Ed Haley too.
Yes. All right,
Mm.
people are still out there with us. Okay, I think I can give that one a try. We don't have to play it long if it doesn't go as well.
We tried to include at least one chestnut.
Yeah, and this is
in these tunes.
kind of
And
a
this is
chestnutty
the
tune.
chestnut. This is one of the first tunes I ever learned to play old time.
That's right. Magpie.
Magpie.
Yeah. And I won't say what I usually say to you about the
Don't
tunes
say it
until
because
after
it'll
we
mess you
play
up.
it.
It'll mess you up.
Exactly. I will
Absolutely.
disclose part of my difficulty with it later on.
Okay, so not being a fiddler, and I don't even know what I'm talking about at all, but what I hear coming out of you that makes this tune really nice and special is trills.
Well,
You
it's
have anything to say about that?
I wouldn't say it's exactly like ornaments from the left hand, but it has a very sort of chirpy, which goes with the tune, bouncy feel in the A part, and it's kind of all around the instrument, little scale figures and maybe some arpeggios as well. And then it opens up a whole lot in the B part. The B part is with long bow strokes and long note values, at least at the beginning. It's just a very sweet little tune, isn't it?
Well, I think that's why it became a chestnut.
Maybe so.
There's a reason for chestnut and a reason for cliche.
That's right. This isn't one that I learned long ago. It's a more recent one
Early
for me,
for me, though.
everybody who's been in this music for a long time seems to have known it from long ago.
Yeah.
Let us know how long you've played Magpie.
Yeah, right.
Is that correct?
I think so.
Okay, we'll find out. is Magpie.
Yeah.
All right, so I have two challenges with this tune, and if I voiced either of them before I played it, it just wouldn't have worked out at all. For a reason,
Don't say
well,
about that.
I want to.
Okay.
I want to.
Because it's going to screw everybody else up. And
Well,
we're going to do that with the last two.
Maybe it's not, though, because maybe they'll tell me, like, I need to get a clue, and there's no reason I should put these two tunes under the same heading. I get that tune, Magpie, so mixed up with Cuffy, also a G tune. I should check the chord progressions and see if they're the same. I don't know. I mean, the melodies are not really that similar, Beth pointed out to me, but they have some things in common, maybe no more in common than any other tunes in the key of G.
But what I said to you when you said that the other night is that Cuffy does not have trills.
Well, maybe
it doesn't
not.
need trilling.
I
It doesn't have any of that. Cuffy's very loopy, you know.
It has a more rolling feeling, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe, but maybe this one has a rolling feeling too. I
No,
just
this
don't
one has a
know.
trilly feeling.
Okay. It sounds like the bird that it is. Yeah. All
Exactly.
right. And then, the other issue that I have is with the way I want that B part final phrase to go, which is... I just have the hardest time playing that cleanly. It's a left hand, like, finger differentiation problem, and I didn't do it super well, and I did it cautiously the times that I actually pulled it off just now. And sometimes I changed that phrase because I didn't think I could play it the way I wanted.
This is another one of those chestnuts in which the tune's actually pretty dang hard.
Yeah. There are a number of those
figure.
tunes that became popular and aren't that easy to play.
Arkansas
so it's a
Traveler,
wonder that they
yes,
became that
me.
popular. Arkansas Traveler is
Yeah.
a difficult tune.
So,
That's right.
Anyway.
All right, back
we'll
to our
stop whining and
normally
move on.
scheduled program.
Yeah.
Are you all having fun yet?
We don't usually whine this much.
No.
I think it's because I was sitting there I was looking up at the sky and everything. It sounds like it's thundering outside. And we, the storm day, Thursday?
Friday.
Friday, we spent at least, we had 4 tornado warnings in our town, in which we spent some time in the bathroom. And we forgot to take the instruments in. I was like, what have we forgotten to bring? And it's like, well, we left the antique instruments there. But anyway, it makes me a little nervous to hear it. So I hope I'm not really
I thought I was hearing some
I
noise.
hope I'm
Maybe
not
that's
hearing
it.
thunder and all that stuff again.
All right. Anybody out there playing along or watching in, was it the Rockbridge Festival with us? I know Michelle was there.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the rest of you were there too. Anybody
Sandy
who was
Parks.
there? Oh, right.
Sandy
Sandy was
Parks
there
was
at
there.
Rockbridge.
Yeah, Mary Sue was there.
Right. Okay, a few Rockbridge people are out there. Did you get to hear Bobby Taylor play the fiddle in either the concert or the square dance? He was fabulous. The Bobby Taylor Band was one of the house bands at Rockbridge this year, and he's just so good. And we don't have very many opportunities to hear Bobby play. He's always at Clifftop running the contests, but I don't think even there he gets much of an opportunity to play the fiddle, but he's fabulous. And the next tune we're going to do is one that I learned through him.
And had he trained quite a few really good fiddlers?
Lots of champion fiddlers have come through Bobby.
Tessa McCoy, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Tessa is one of them.
So.
This is the Sally Johnson. Bobby calls it Sally Ann Johnson. I haven't heard that title put with this tune from anyone else. Maybe that's how he learned it. But a lot of people know it as Sally Johnson. G tune, it's a little bit like, what is a little bit like? Katie Hill, I suppose. It's just a prototypical G tune, but I'm going to play it with some turns of phrase that I got off of Bobby's fiddling, and he did play it at Rockbridge, so it was a pleasure to hear.
That's why we
again
thought
after
of
many
it.
years.
That's why we thought of it.
That's right. And at one point there's a low variation, and I was trying to decide where to put that low variation to keep the structure predictable for this jam, and I'm going to use it as a replacement for a B part from time to time. That may or may not be where you all are used to hearing a low variation, but I'll do my best to be consistent in putting it in that spot and surrounding it by A parts. Not too fast, not the Bobby Taylor speed.
No, Bobby plays at 100 miles an hour.
He sure does, and
Yeah.
every note is crystal clear. Van Johnson, according to Bobby Taylor. And if you haven't heard him play that tune, see if you can find footage of him doing it on YouTube. He's just fabulous with it.
He really is. I can't really read who's online, but I just saw one I could read, and Smack's on. Hey, Smack.
Oh, hi, Smack.
Somebody else I got to play with and had a wonderful time with at Clifftop.
Absolutely.
And he did pretty dang well in the contest, too.
He sure did.
Yeah, he did.
He sure did. Looking a little farther back here, Barb Schmidt agrees that Cuffy and Magpie resemble each other somehow. Rose Spink says the same thing.
Vindicated.
But nobody else says anything about them.
Well, they're both fiddlers.
They are. Thank
you. There you go.
Thank you both.
So.
All right, we've got a couple tunes left on our list. The next one we want to send out to good friends of ours from the Philadelphia area, from whom we learned this tune originally.
Who got in the contest in the adult fiddle?
That's right. Palmer Laux got a prize in the senior fiddle contest.
Senior fiddle, yeah.
At Clifftop. Yep. Palmer with her wonderful guitar playing husband Greg have a couple great albums out. This
sure do.
With the Run of the Mill String Band.
Yeah.
And with just themselves and assorted musicians. And I think this was on the first album that they
assorted
did.
musician on the first one.
Right. And I think, isn't that...
I think it is.
This tune was from that album, but you didn't play on it.
No, I didn't.
No. The tune is Snakewinder. According to Slippery Hill, it comes from Buddy Thomas originally, but we both learned it from Palmer's fabulous fiddling. And if you haven't heard Palmer play the fiddle, that's another person you should look up online.
She's a wonderful fiddler.
Absolutely. And this is going to have a little bit more E minor in it, right?
Let me just see what happens.
Oh yeah,
okay.
You know where the E minor is.
All right.
tune with us.
I think we should go on to that.
Yeah? Okay, fine. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, just checking
Yeah.
what folks are saying.
And like we said, we didn't want y'all to think that we had gotten real slick over the summer, because clearly that isn't the case.
Right. Oh, here's another interesting tune comparison. Brendan says he hears Snakewinder as a version of No Corn on Tigers. I'm going to have to think about that.
Which one?
The G one that we thought about including. Probably a good thing we didn't in that case. Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
I could see that.
Yeah.
All right, we're getting ready to do a final number that happens to be a waltz. We've had various requests for more old-time waltzes. I wish we knew more of them, but we've been trying to learn some over the summer,
Didn't
so
Michelle teach us
we will
one
keep
that was
them
really
coming.
beautiful? Was it Michelle?
One came up in the Rockbridge Jam with Michelle. I think one of those other fiddlers was leading it, but
Yeah.
I recorded it.
It was beautiful.
Is that a D waltz?
I
Don't
forget.
remember.
Anyway.
Need to go back and check. Anyway, we'll try to keep these waltzes coming because I think there's a little bit of a stigma against waltzes in old-time jams, not in old-time music generally. There are lots of great waltzes that have been recorded, mainly on the fiddle, but some clawhammer banjo players don't feel like they know what to do when a waltz comes up. Well, just do the same thing you normally do, just in 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I think the clawhammer stride is perfect for waltzes, honestly, and the rhythm guitar thing is very straightforward if you just think in 3 and envision the dancers, right? Isn't that what you talk about a lot?
I never count. I just don't. I don't count at all in my head. But what I do is visualize, like when we play contra dances and we sit up on the stage and then there's a final waltz, and I just visualize the people waltzing, and that helps me keep the rhythm, and to make the rhythm, to make the chording a little prettier, not so blam blam blam, but flowy.
So we're going to do our best to keep including at least one waltz in our upcoming online old-time jams, and maybe more than one, depending on the key that we're in and how large our repertoire of waltzes is.
If y'all know any that you think would be appropriate for jam, I mean, not ones like Lover's Waltz that, like nobody but Jay Unger can play.
We can't play Lover's
things like
Waltz.
that, but things that are, kind of straightforward and but beautiful, and so...
Let us know some favorite waltzes in the comments.
throw them in the comments and we'll try to learn some.
Yeah, absolutely. Let us know how you're feeling about another season of these online old-time jams, too. We never really know what to expect when we come back after our summer festival season break, but we've been getting some good view counts on the live screen there, so if you think there's still a place for these, we're going to keep them coming. We have a giant tune list of kind of every tune that we can think of that's in our repertoire, and I keep worrying that we're out of tunes on that list from having done so many of these jams, but we've still got a surprising number of jam-suitable tunes that we haven't done yet.
Learn some new ones.
We can learn some new ones. These have been great opportunities for us to learn tunes and just get our acts together.
And I think one other thing that could be really helpful to us would be to tell us like which night of the week would be good. To do. We tend to like to do them either like on Fridays or Sundays, but if it's like the dead of winter, we'll do it on a Saturday, you know, or something like that. Weekends are generally what we prefer. We have, but if it's like during Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever, like, if
we're not working as usual, we could do a weekday or a weeknight one. So let us know if you have any thoughts on that score.
Yeah, we appreciate thoughts on that score. And time, we try to make it a convenient time for everybody.
We're in the Eastern time zone, so we can only go kind of late.
And we try. Sometimes we've done one as early as 5, haven't we? For the UK people,
right? Sorry, this one is late for the UK people.
Yeah. So, but remind them about the availability.
Right. We're not doing these on a particular frequency. We have kind of a choppy fall and early winter schedule as it is, but just keep watching Facebook for announcements.
Every 6 weeks.
Yeah.
We
give
try
or
to
take
go
every couple months.
5 to 6 weeks, something like that.
I think that's optimistic. 5 weeks.
Okay, whatever.
Just saying.
Yeah.
But we are planning to do one in November. We've already penciled in the weekend. We haven't figured out which day over that weekend.
Yeah.
We want to do it, but
Yeah.
stay tuned. I always announce through my page, and Beth shares the announcement on her page, and we try to put them in some of the most read groups on Facebook.
And do suggest other tunes, that you think. Not,
if we know them or if
again,
we can learn them.
And once again, not something super complex that would be hard for other people to learn on, easily.
Jam-friendly tunes
Jam-friendly
for all
tunes
of
that,
us.
that we've not thought of, or even, really big-time chestnuts that we haven't done.
Yeah, we probably overlooked some of those too.
Your Arkansas Travelers.
Right.
Things like that.
Right.
So.
If you're interested in throwing some spare change our way, please feel free. I tried to pin tip jar links at the top of the comments, but it wouldn't let me do the pinning tonight for some reason. But if you go back to the full Facebook view, not the zoomed in video view, where I say come jam with us in the key of G, you'll see PayPal and Venmo links up there. But no obligation, of course. We just love to do these, and we love that you jam along with us. Oh, right. We do leave these videos archived on my page. They can be a little hard to find, and we have no control over how Facebook archives them, unfortunately, but if you go through my photos and then videos, you'll be able to find, with just a little bit of
demonstrate
scanning,
again what you're doing.
well, this isn't true of all of them, but it's
they
true of most
late.
of them.
Yeah.
If you look among my videos, and I don't have hundreds and hundreds of videos, look for the thumbnails that kind of look like this, where I'm looking for the button to press.
That's a very good way to check it.
But some of the videos' thumbnails, for some reason, don't look like that, and they just have both of us there. But click around, and you'll find a bunch more jams where this one came from.
Well, and generally, on your page, if I'm in it, it's probably going to be a jam.
Mostly.
Yeah. So.
And the benefit of checking out the jams after the fact is then you have access to the pause button, and you can rewind and fast forward to get to the tunes you want to really get to know better, and to fast forward through all of our talking.
Yeah, right. Which can be
and all of our confusion.
Yeah, right.
All right, so our waltz for this evening is the Tombigbee Waltz, and that's not to be confused with the Tombigbee River Gumtree Canoe song, which is also a waltz.
And I'm sorry we said that, because the minute you say that, you can, and if you're familiar with Gumtree Canoe, that's the only thing you can think of. So we had to make up lyrics, all on the fly to the waltz.
And I've written out a little cheat sheet for myself with melody.
Don't sing that song, don't sing that song.
Right.
It'll be bad if you sing that song.
Yes.
Like that. So,
exactly.
So that's the waltz that I was just using the melody. Yeah.
Yep.
So,
that's the one we're going to do without lyrics of our own or anybody else's.
Yeah, right.
We hope you enjoy jamming along. We hope you have enjoyed jamming along this whole time.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining in and
We
for
appreciate
putting
it.
up with our sort of loosey-goosey stuff for this being the first jam back at it after several months.
We make no bones about being slick, that's for sure.
No. No, we just like to play, and we like to hang out with you all.
Yeah, in a big way.
All right. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Waltz, not the Gum
Not
Tree
the Gum Tree
Canoe.
Canoe. So,
I didn't even worry about us transitioning into the wrong melody.
if you want to hear a marvelous version of the Gum Tree Canoe, listen to Brad Leftwich.
Oh, is that right?
That's what I
Ooh,
heard.
I don't think I've heard him do
Not
it.
the waltz, the song.
Right.
I think.
Okay.
That's where I heard it.
I'll have to go looking for that. Thank you all for being with us.
Thanks for putting up with us.
Hope you had a fun time.
And
I know we did.
We hope to see you the next time.
Yep. And we do go back through these comments.
Yeah,
so if you're
yeah.
viewing in real time or after the fact and you
Yeah.
can think of things we should do differently or consider including in future sets, just throw them in there and we will check them out.
And we hope we cross paths with some of you in real life sooner than later.
Yep, hope so. And we'll be back here again sometime in November. Cheers all.
Bye-bye.